How's my hair? It's not like I'm gonna be able to see anything anyway. Perfect. Hi, I'm Steve, and this video is gonna be a bit different than what you're used to on my channel. Let me explain. So first of all, I want to thank you for subscribing to this channel because we have now passed 2,000 subscribers on this channel alone. Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you for those who are joining in for the first time and those who have been with me since the very beginning. I really appreciate it. And I do have more blind gamers coming soon. I have recorded a bunch and I am going to be putting them out really soon. But I wanted to kind of give you a bit of a gift for thanking you for subscribing, whether you are brand new to this channel or you've been there since the very beginning. And that is in the form of an audio story that I wrote. For those who may not know, a couple years ago, I actually used to be a writer. And I say used to be only because I hadn't really written anything new over the past couple years. But the last project that I worked on was something that I kind of coined called a cover story album. There was a song that I really liked called House of the Rising Sun. And I always thought that it was kind of spooky. There was a bit of a horror theme to it. And so I was inspired by it, and I kind of wrote a story based around that song. And so I wrote it, and I recorded it as an audio story because I'm a big fan of Audible. I'm a big fan of sort of audio stories in general because personally that is how I read most of my books, is through listening to it in audio form, because it's a lot harder for me to be able to read in proper print format or an ebook format. So I was always inspired by those audiobooks, so I kind of wanted to create my own, and that's what I did with House of the Rising Sun. But I decided to kind of go a bit extra, and I actually had some of my friends record cover versions of House of the Rising Sun, and I put it together into an album called the Cover Story Album, and I put it up online, and I was very proud of how it turned out. And it was a pretty cool project, and unfortunately kind of just has been sitting on the internet digital shelf, as it were. And because I've been doing a lot of videos lately in regards to my YouTube channel, I wanted to at least be able to showcase a little bit of my writing and offer this up as a gift to you. So I'm going to read a little bit of the description of House of the Rising Sun, so that hopefully this will kind of entice you to want to be able to listen more, or to be able to check it out on your own. So the song House of the Rising Sun, let's go a little bit dramatic. The song House of the Rising Sun has been a folk song for well over 100 years. No one knows who wrote it or where it came from. However, for FBI agent Joseph Carter, after chasing a murderous criminal for 2 years, he reaches a dead end when the person he's been chasing ends up dead in New Orleans, at the very spot where the House of the Rising Sun used to be. New Orleans is a ruin for many a poor boy, and Joseph hopes he's not one. Ooh. Are you interested? Well, watch the rest of this video and you'll be able to hear the full audio story of myself reading House of the Rising Sun, written by me, Steve Saylor. And if you want to be able to check out the full album and also to check out the songs, the cover songs that were created, there's a link in the description down below. I will have more Blind Gamer coming out very soon. Just trust me, they'll be coming soon, and so we'll get back to regularly scheduled programming in just a little bit. Anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to this story. And as always, I remain obediently yours. Bye. Enjoy the story.
House of the Rising Sun, a cover story by Steve Saylor. Joseph opened his eyes standing in the hotel lobby. He was dead tired and wet. Standing on the front door welcome mat, he furled and unfurled his umbrella to dispose of the water that splashed all over it. He dragged his wheeled suitcase and adjusted his messenger bag on his shoulder as he walked towards the front desk. His shoes squished and slid against the tiled floor. The sound echoed throughout the lobby, disturbing old people sitting on the lobby couches reading the newspaper. Joseph offered a quick smile of apology and then turned his attention to the black man behind the desk. "Welcome to the Rising Sun. Do you have a reservation?"
What did he say?
Red-eye, jet lag. Sorry? "Welcome to the Prince Conti Hotel. Do you have a reservation?" The desk clerk smiled at him, his teeth as white as a sheet of paper, his eyes as black as a night sky. He wore a dark burgundy jacket with a very neatly tied bow tie. Joseph couldn't help but notice a scar on the top of his bald head. It was darker than the rest of his skin tone. Before the clerk caught him staring, Joseph looked away. Yeah, sorry. Should be under Carter, Joseph Carter." The clerk typed furiously into the computer and saw Joseph's name appear on the screen. "Ah, yes, Mr. Carter, we have you here." He then grabbed a key card and programmed it for his room number. As he did so, the printer printed off Joseph's reservation information. The clerk handed the form to him to sign. Joseph looked for a pen on the desk but didn't see one. "Here, take mine," the clerk said. Joseph looked up and saw a fountain pen in the clerk's hands as he still smiled that big, white, toothy smile. Joseph hadn't seen that kind of pen in ages. Thanks," Joseph replied, taking the pen. The ink smell reminded Joseph of his childhood, his father giving him lessons in penmanship. "I won't have a son of mine be a slave to the typed word if he can write it," his father would say. "FBI, huh?" the clerk asked as Joseph's eyes went from the clerk's face to the FBI logo on his jacket. "Yeah." Joseph gave that look like he didn't want to offer more than just that. Mostly the jet lag talking anyway. "Here's your room key." The clerk handed Joseph an old black metal key and placed it in Joseph's hand. Joseph blinked and clasped his hand around the plastic key card. Thanks," Joseph replied. "You're in room 535. Is there anything you need?" the clerk asked. Joseph couldn't believe it, but his white, toothy smile grew even bigger. No, thank you. Just a wake-up call at 6. "Very well, sir. Enjoy your stay." The clerk then left his desk and into a closed back room. The opaque metal doors opened as Joseph adjusted his messenger bag again and dragged his suitcase onto the hallway carpet. The hallway was silent, save for the hum of the vending machines down the hall. Joseph grabbed the key card and pushed it into the key slot. A maid walked behind him carrying towels. The light on the door flashed green, and Joseph pulled the handle down and pushed the door open into the dark room. A maid walked behind him carrying towels. The light flicked on as Joseph stared at a large double bed, a nightstand, a desk, a couch, and a flat-screen TV. The air was dry as the AC blew from the back by the curtains. Joseph sat on the edge of the bed and took out a cell phone from his pocket. Saw enough battery life to call home. "Hello?" a raspy female voice answered. "Hey, hon, sorry to wake you," Joseph half whispered. No, it's fine. You make it to New Orleans okay?" "Just got to the hotel. Listen, I wanted to apologize for this morning." "Apology accepted. You were just being an asshole again." There was a rustling on the line as Joseph's wife, Helen, moved under the bed sheets. "I gotta see someone about that," Joseph smiled. "It's no big deal. I've dealt with worse," Helen replied. "Can we not bring your father into this?" Joseph smiled again. "The colonel can suck it for all I care," Helen quipped back. There was a long pause as they sat in silence. Joseph noticed a bit of a musty smell enveloping his room. He got up and walked to the bathroom to grab the bottle of Febreze on the counter, which was odd, Joseph noticed, but realized they must get this complaint a lot. Joseph began to spray across the room. "Okay?" Helen asked. What?" Joseph asked, realizing he didn't hear the question. "I said be careful." Helen spoke a bit louder. "I will," Joseph replied back after giving the room a satisfied sniff. Go back to sleep. I'll call you in the morning." "You won't, but good night. Love you." Joseph heard a click and then nothing as his phone disconnected. Helen was right. He probably wouldn't call. He'd be too busy. He'll try anyway. Joseph laid in bed and set his alarm for 6 a.m. and fell asleep. He opened his eyes to the sound of his alarm ringtone as it went off. He slammed his hand down on the bells of the bedside clock and got up. He couldn't believe it was 6 a.m. already. He just went to bed. It was really dark and musty in his room. Like a zombie, he walked towards the bathroom, stubbing his toe on what he assumed was the corner of the wall. He hobbled into the bathroom. He couldn't find the light switch on the wall for whatever reason. He could barely see a thing. He thought about grabbing his phone to use as a flashlight, but remembered his toe and thought against it. As he kept searching in the dark, a loud knocking rapped at his door. Abandoning his search for light, he yelled, "Just a sec!" The knocking continued. "Hold on!" Joseph said, annoyed. He finally stumbled out of the bathroom and searched for the brass doorknob and turned it open. The light from the hall was dim, but bright enough for Joseph to squint at the sudden illumination. When he could see who was knocking, there was no one. He peered out into the hallway and saw nothing. He looked the other way and again saw nothing. "Son of a..." Voices sounded from down the hall. "Hello?" Joseph turned his head back down the other end of the hallway and could again see nothing. His eyes now adjusting to the light, he blinked several times and still saw no one. He heard the voices again at the end of the hall. Joseph walked out of his room and towards the voices. "Hey, this isn't funny, you stupid kids!" Joseph could hear the tick-tock of the clock as it sat on a table in between two rooms. He passed a mirror and looked at his own reflection. He realized he wasn't wearing a shirt, but he didn't care. He kept walking, his bare feet softly stepping on the multicolored design on the carpet. The musty smell still in the air as Joseph picked up hints of sweat. It was New Orleans in August. Humidity seeped everywhere. The voices were growing softer as they drifted down the hall. Joseph sped up his walk. He could see at the end of the hall his own reflection in the mirror walking towards it. A maid walked behind him carrying towels. Joseph turned around quickly and saw nothing but empty hall behind him. His head light as the sudden rush of adrenaline pumped through him. It took him a second to remember which way he came. He began to smell cigar smoke and the voices grew louder. Joseph began to run towards the end of the hall where the voices were coming from. As he ran, his feet moved in slow motion. He suddenly couldn't remember how to walk. His feet stumbled as Joseph grabbed onto the nearest hall stand. The wooden clock on it began to shift lightly under the sudden weight of Joseph's body. It kept ticking as Joseph pulled himself forward. A maid walked behind him carrying towels. Joseph turned his head to a now dark hallway. He tried to grab onto the wall after there was no more table to grab onto. Slowly he hobbled his way towards the end of the corridor. The hallway lights went out, and he just hugged the wall in the black. He blinked as he tried to adjust his eyes to the sudden darkness. "Eggs, bacon, and brown toast, right?" Joseph blinked and was staring at a young, short, blonde woman, wearing a white shirt, burgundy vest, and holding a notepad staring back at him.
Yeah, right.
Joseph, without thinking, handed her the menu he was holding. She walked away with a smile. Joseph looked down on the table and saw a fresh cup of coffee. He poured a creamer and a packet of sugar and downed almost half the cup in one gulp. He set the cup down on the saucer and rubbed his hands through his wet hair. Shaking his head to wake up, he grabbed his phone and saw the time, 8:24 a.m. On the display read a text message from his boss. "Get to work." It was a gentle ribbing that made Joseph smile as he clicked the phone to sleep, without a reply. He moved his legs and added pressure on his feet as if to stand up. He felt okay. He sighed with relief. The waitress came back with his breakfast. "I'll get you a fresh cup," as she motioned to his empty mug. The breakfast was not bad. As Joseph stared out into the lobby, seeing the patrons walk in and out of the rain, either soaked or shaking umbrellas free of water. A black woman in a really old tattered dress stared at him from across the hall. An old couple walked in from the rain, shaking their jackets, sending a spray of water onto the floor. Joseph took another sip from his coffee as the waitress came by right on cue to fill up another mug. "Someone needs a pick-me-up," she quipped. "Yeah, something like that," Joseph replied, already adding an extra $1 to her tip. She cleared his plate off of the table and added more creamer to the bowl. Joseph grabbed his phone and saw the time, 9:02. Another text, this time from Helen. "Morning, hon." Joseph replied back, "Morning back. How'd you sleep?" She replied 2 minutes later, "Okay, you?" "I honestly don't remember. Can't wait to come home." "Mom called. She fixed your lucky jeans." "Fantastic," he replied in all caps. "Gotta go." "TTYL," she responded. He clicked his phone to sleep and left cash on the table. Before leaving, he took one last sip of his coffee, getting the last drop. He waved to the waitress a thank you as he walked out of the lobby dining room and towards the elevators to get back to his room. The black woman in tattered old clothes stared back at him from the opposite elevator before the doors closed. He blinked. Joseph burped up his breakfast and grabbed his laptop, which needed more charging after forgetting to plug it in last night, and put it in his messenger bag. Standing on the curb waiting for a cab, he tightened his coat to protect him from the torrential rain. The cabbie pulled up and Joseph walked in. The black woman in tattered clothes stared at him from the sliding hotel doors. 2901 Leon C. Simone Drive, Joseph told the cabbie. After closing his eyes for just a moment, Joseph woke up suddenly when the cab stopped in front of the gates of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's office in New Orleans. An armed officer walked up to Joseph's side of the cab as he rolled down the window and handing the officer his FBI badge. The officer looked it over and then nodded for the gate to open. He handed the badge back to Joseph and said, "Welcome to New Orleans, Agent Carter." Thanks," Joseph replied. The cab pulled up to the concrete archway that overlooked the front doors. Joseph got out and paid the cabbie. As the taxi pulled away, Joseph looked up and saw 2 officers standing on either side of the door, and simultaneously opened both the double doors to let Joseph walk in. He replied with a thanks and walked up to the front desk. The FBI crest hung overhead with large chrome letters underneath spelling out New Orleans. The young black woman looked up as Joseph grabbed his belongings from the security scanner. She smiled as Joseph walked up and signed in on the visitor clipboard. "Agent Joseph Carter to see Agent Robert Carlyle." "Of course, I'll let him know you're coming. 3rd floor, elevators to your left," she replied, picking up the phone and calling Carlyle's extension. "Thank you," Joseph mouthed silently as he walked towards the elevator. When he reached the 3rd floor, the doors opened to Agent Carlyle standing, waiting for him. "Joe, good to see you again." Robert extended his hand. Robert was a heavy-set man with thinning gray-black hair. His suit could barely fit him as Joseph knew he had been sitting behind a field desk for too long. Carlyle was a well-known veteran field agent and had to give it up when diabetes kicked in. Joseph shook his hand and said, "Thanks, Bob. You too." "You look bush. Bad flight?" Bob asked, motioning for Joseph to follow him back to his office.
Sort of. Just not getting much sleep these days.
Well, I think you can rest easy now, Robert said.
So you did find him?
Dead as a doornail. Autopsy is happening now. I'll take you to him. First, I'll introduce you to the boys and girls. Robert led Joseph to a set of cubicles with several agents at their desks. Joseph Carter, meet agents Lynn Holloway, Len Weissman, Jackie Rose, and Tim Buckner. All 4 agents got up and nodded when Robert called out their name. Joseph nodded back at them and replied,
Hello.
You hear about the Haynes case? Agent Len Weissman, a short black-haired, stocky man, asked, holding his arms.
You bet. Hoping I didn't come all this way for nothing, Joseph replied.
It's definitely Haynes, Jen Holloway, a medium-build, long brunette hair and full lips, answered as she stared at Joseph. Easy to identify the body when we clear the dirt away.
Dirt? Joseph asked.
He looked like a filthy hobo, Robert answered. He was found on Conti Street, just lying on the ground. NOPD called us right away when they recognized his wanted mugshot.
Why was he on Conti Street? Joseph asked.
We're looking into a few leads. I'll bring you up to speed on it, Robert replied.
Sirs?
Tim Buckner asked.
What?
Robert replied. Joseph turned to Tim and saw a rookie kid looking back. Joseph could tell he was a rookie because Joseph looked like that when he was a rookie. I know you said not to dwell on the supernatural stuff here, but
I told you to look into the history of the place where he was found. What is it?
Tim picked up a small folder, opened it up, and read his findings. Do you know the song House of the Rising Sun?
What are you getting at? Joseph asked.
Well, as the lyrics say, Tim looked down to read the exact lyric. There is a house in New Orleans. It's called the Rising Sun. The folk song is well over 100 years old, and no one knew of its origins. Some would fill in New Orleans with another town as the song passed from region to region. But the New Orleans lyric stayed and was passed on more than any other version. Well, there actually was a rising sun here in the city back in the 1800s. It was a gentleman's hotel where a man could be discreet with whatever he wanted to do there. It burned down in 1822. Reason unknown. What has that got to do with Haynes? Len asked. Tim looked up and noticed everyone was staring at him. He swallowed quickly and replied, His body was found where the rising sun would have been.
Tim, I told you to look up any recent history of the place, letting us know why his body would have been found there, not dig up some story that's almost 200 years old, Robert said, ushering Joseph back to his office.
But, sir, Tim interjected, it's not the first case of a body found there. Joseph and Robert turned around.
What?
Both asked. I requested police records, and they have found at least 6 bodies within the past 50 years, found at the exact same spot.
Why only 50 years? Joseph asked.
Paper records older than 50 years were kept in boxes, while the rest after was digitized. Those paper records were destroyed during Katrina.
So there could have been more bodies? Lynn asked.
If they kept good records back then, maybe.
Why did you mention supernatural stuff? Joseph asked.
Voodoo paranormal activity has ramped up over the past few months.
That's not on any official record, got it? Tim nodded.
Full report on my desk, Tim, by end of day, Robert said as he walked back to his office while Joseph followed.
You believe that voodoo is involved with Haynes' death?
Joseph asked as Robert closed the door behind him in his office.
Not officially, but it's New Orleans. Voodoo is part of the territory, Robert said, walking to his desk.
Joe, I'll take you to see his body to confirm it's who you've been after. But afterwards, I want you to get out of town.
Why, Bob? This has been my case for 2 years. I've been chasing this guy all over the country.
I know, but let us handle this. We know what we're dealing with.
I don't care. I'm seeing this thing through. I'm not going to stop when I'm 2 yards short of a touchdown.
Your 4th down conversion failed when he showed up on my desk, Joe. This is my jurisdiction.
Don't pull that with me, Bob. It's my damn case.
Whoa, Joe. I'm doing you a favor. Just let us do the paperwork on this, save you time doing it yourself, and that way you can go home and take some time off. We can handle this.
I'm supposed to just let you take this away?
Robert walked over to Joseph and stood in front of him. Joe, calm down. I'm not taking anything away from you. You've done great work. So what if he's dead now? His reign of murderous terror is over. Let us clean this up for you, and you can get to the huge pile of cases probably sitting on your desk right now. Joseph started to calm down as he rubbed the bridge of his nose.
I'm sorry, Bob. Dude, get some rest. You're way on edge. How many cups of coffee did you drink?
Too many. Go back to the hotel. I'll get a car for you. Get some sleep, and I'll call you when the autopsy's done. Robert led Joseph out of the office and down the hall. Joseph sighed as he walked through the elevator doors. We've got this, okay? Joseph nodded.
Okay,
was all he could reply.
3450,
John startled awake by the cabbie as he was back in front of his hotel.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Right.
Joseph scrambled as he grabbed 220s. He shook his head when he entered the lobby. Patrons walked to and fro everywhere in the lobby, but all Joseph saw was a blur. "Excuse me, good sir, are you checking in?" Joseph quickly turned around to find a black woman in tattered old-fashioned clothes. Startled, he stepped back and asked,
I'm sorry, what?
"The rising sun, you checking in?" she coyly asked.
No, Joseph said as he looked back at the front desk. I already... Wait, what'd you say?
He turned back and the woman was gone. Joseph spun around but couldn't see the woman anywhere. He rubbed the heels of his palms against his eye sockets and shook his head. Joseph collapsed onto his bed, his head bouncing off the mattress, causing it to buckle the springs under his weight. He sat back up, took off his shoes, collapsed again, closing his eyes. Joseph groaned as he sat back up.
Hold on! Jeez, I said hold on!
Joseph screamed as he turned the brass knob on the door. Nothing. No one.
Ah, come on,
Joseph said out loud. As he was about to close the door, a black hand pushed back against it. Joseph looked and saw the black woman again. She stared at him with her soft face. Her hair disheveled. Her dress left nothing to be desired as her chest was about to burst from it.
Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but I'm a federal agent. Stalking is against the law.
Joseph thought that would scare her off, but she just stared back. He tried closing the door again, but she wouldn't budge.
I don't want to arrest you, but if you don't let go of...
Suddenly she blinked, and her eyes turned a bright, glowing red. Redder and brighter than any light he had ever seen. Joseph let go of the door as she forced it open. A rushing wind blew right past her and began to envelop Joseph as he scrambled back. Barefoot, she slowly walked in, her toes crunching the carpet beneath her feet. As she walked into the room, one after another, more women in the same tattered clothes, the same red glowing eyes followed into the room. Joseph fell back onto the bed. Voices began to echo in his brain. He couldn't understand any of them. It was white noise. The first black woman stuck out her hand at Joseph, and he was suddenly thrown on the headboard. His body began to rise off the mattress. He screamed. The women echoed the exact scream back at him. The sound was so intense that Joseph winced in pain. The other women stepped around the bed, surrounding it, as the leader stood, still holding Joseph in place. They started to breathe heavily, but each breath grew louder and turned into a deep,
guttural growl.
The leader twisted her hand, and Joseph fell on his face onto the bed. He screamed again, but this time a deep, growling laughter echoed back from outside the room. Joseph looked up and saw a large black man wearing only a loincloth and a large headdress made out of pieces of pure white bone. He smiled wide as he laughed. His smile was as white as the desk clerk downstairs.
Son of a bitch!
He screamed. The women laughed hard. Walking slowly, the desk clerk imposter scraped together 2 large white pieces of bone. He nodded to the leader of the women as she lifted her hand again and turned her wrist. As she did so, Joseph shot back up into the air and turned around so he was perpendicular to the bed. She stepped out of the way as the imposter stood at the foot of the bed. He smiled again, then tilted his head back, opened his mouth, and from out of his stomach his skin started to crawl as whatever was in his gut began to crawl up and up into his throat, and what came out of his mouth was a swarm of black, slimy scorpions. They crawled all over his body and onto the floor until the entire room was covered in them. Joseph began to swat them off of him, but was suddenly overtaken as their stingers began to snap and inject into his skin. Joseph screamed, but his screams echoed back to him as he kept getting stung and stung and stung. Joseph felt extremely dizzy as the poison from the stings began to inch throughout his body. The imposter lifted up his hand and took each of the bones and sliced the palm of his hand slowly. He then handed a bone to the leader on his left and to the woman on his right, as they did the same thing, all while their eyes began to pulsate and grow a brighter red and orange as if they were on fire. As the last girls slit their palms, they rubbed each of them together and set their hands on Joseph and tore off his clothes. He screamed and scrambled to squirm away, but the scorpion poison had paralyzed him. He wanted to scream, but when he tried, it was barely above a whisper. He began to whimper, "Please, what do you want with me?" The imposter stared back at him. His eyes instantly glowed bright blue. The light was so bright that all Joseph could see was those glowing eyes and those bright white teeth.
Welcome to the rising sun.
His laugh bellowed throughout the room as suddenly fire shot up from the floors and the ceiling and quickly flooded the whole room. The women and the imposter started to chant in low, deep voices in unison. Then the girls who held the white bones began to slowly slice down Joseph's skin, cutting him so deep that blood poured out of the wounds like water over rock. Joseph cried in pain. He wanted to pass out from it, but for some reason his body stayed awake for each and every cut. As the flames grew closer and closer to the bed, the women stopped slicing and began to twitch and flicker in and out as if they were static interruption on a TV. They were half there and half gone, flickering in and out of existence. The imposter from out of nowhere grabbed a little tiny figure of a man. It was made out of burlap and was hastily stitched together to look like him. Joseph realized it was a voodoo doll of himself and cried out in terror again. This time the imposter reacted to the screams by slicing a bone across the doll's mouth. Suddenly Joseph's tongue detached from the back of his throat, which made him cough up blood as it bursted out of his mouth, along with his own tongue. His muffled cries turned into moans as he pleaded for this whole thing to stop. The flames were now looking at his fingers and toes as they had reached the bed. The women disappeared in screams of ecstasy as the imposter stared back at him, smiling, always smiling. His big white toothy grin as he licked his lips. His body began to cook and burn as the flames climbed up his tall, dark figure. His eyes turned to a dark black as fire began to seep inside his body and made his skin glow with flames. He laughed once more as flames shot out of his mouth. He then began to hover off of the ground and over Joseph's body. He crouched down, his face inches from Joseph's.
You shall become one of us, Joseph Carter, your wife, your children, your whole family will never leave the house of the rising sun.
He laughed hysterically. Flames mixed with blood dripping on Joseph's char-broiled face. Joseph shut his eyes in terror. Everything faded to black. "Another one, Bob?" Tim Buckner walked up to Robert Carlyle sipping on a coffee. It was early in the morning as they stood on Conti Street, police lights rotating blue and red around them. They looked down at a body curled up against the wall on the sidewalk. "This makes what, 5 this year?"
Something like.
Robert bent down to pull the body on his back. Badly burned, blood stained every stitch of clothing it had on him. With a gloved hand, Robert picked at the body's pocket, felt a leather wallet, and carefully pulled it out. He stood back up. "Well, hey, at least this one has a name," Tim said as Robert slowly peeled open the charred leather remains. Inside was a driver's license from California. "Who is it?"
Hard to tell. Part of the name is scorched. Looks like, Joe Carter.
Want me to give a thorough background check?
Don't go too deep. He'll probably be like the others.
Right. Vagrant, found at the former site of the rising sun, no connection to the previous victims.
I could practically write the report in my sleep,
Tim yawned.
Don't, but yeah, it seems like it'll be the case.
What is it with this place, the rising sun? Robert looked up at the building.
200 years ago, there was a hotel. Now you can barely tell one was here.
You know it's beyond us when it comes to the paranormal in this city. Just last week, PD found a huge box of voodoo dolls that were in various states of disrepair. Plus, as the song goes, this place is a ruin for many a poor boy. God, I hope I'm not one. Sir?
That'll be all, Tim. Let's clean this place up.